The Dreadnought War. No one remembered the first strike. Maybe it was because Earth had been so quiet, too quiet after the solar silence. Maybe it was because the galaxy had already written us off as a primitive species, broken by war, barely holding on under rusted satellites and polluted skies. We weren't part of the Galactic Concord. We had no seats at the Alliance Tribunal. We didn't even get the courtesy of a formal declaration. The invasion just happened. They called themselves the Kir Dominion, a race of scaled, silver-skinned warlords who'd swept through 36 systems in half a cycle. They didn't conquer planets. They erased them. Turned oceans into dust bowls, skies into ash, populations into whispers. And Earth? We were their warm-up. The first wave wasn't even military. It was a terraforming sweep. Machines the size of mountains falling through the atmosphere, burning as they came, rewriting the air itself. Cities from Kyoto to Lagos vanished in flame. Whole countries blinked off the grid. Our governments fell apart within hours. Satellites melted in low orbit. Communications died. The galaxy watched from afar and shrugged. The humans were always going to fall. No proper planetary defense. Still running on combustion and bullets. What they didn't know, what no one knew, was that we weren't defenseless. Not anymore. We had kept something hidden, buried deep in the crust of the moon, far beneath the sea of tranquility. It was never meant to be revealed unless the Earth was on the edge of extinction. We called it Project Revenant. And it was angry. When the atmosphere split open over old Nevada and the blackness filled with silver warships, that's when they finally got a response. Not from presidents or generals. Not from global alliances or UN delegates. No. Our answer came from beneath the shadows of craters long forgotten. It started with a tremor, a low rumble in the soil. Then the ground cracked, and from deep beneath the moon's core, they rose, 12 massive dreadnoughts, blacker than the void, each one 1,000 meters long. Their surfaces shimmered with tech the galaxy had never seen. They didn't fly. They ripped space around them. Each one powered by fusion cores fed by artificial singularities. Earth's orbit shuddered. The moon groaned. And the Kir ships paused. It was the first time in their expansion campaign that they had stopped moving forward. Our dreadnoughts didn't send a hail. They didn't negotiate. They didn't explain. They erased the first Kir fleet in under 7 seconds. There was no sound, no warning, just light, blinding and violent, followed by silence. One of their mother ships tried to retreat. It bent space to fold away. It didn't make it, because Dreadnought Orion, the lead of our Revenant fleet, unfolded a weapon not meant for this century, a graviton harpoon locked on the retreating vessel's warp signature and ripped it back into real space, collapsing the ship in on itself like crushed paper. That was the moment the galaxy stopped laughing. That was the moment the stars, once calm and unbothered, woke up, and they heard our voice for the first time in 100 years. This is Earth. We're not just alive. We're coming. The price of victory. The Kir High Command didn't understand what had happened. Their intelligence divisions, arrogant, bloated, used to dissecting primitive species, were silent for hours after the destruction of their forward fleet. When the report finally reached the Dominion's core world of Trasvar, the arch-warlord dismissed it as an anomaly, a sensor glitch. Faulty data. No species from the outer spiral has that kind of firepower, he growled. But Earth wasn't part of the galaxy's story. Not for a long time. While they were building interstellar councils and trading routes, we were building something else. Revenge. Decades ago, after the silent collapse, the global blackout that almost ended our planet, we had stopped trying to play catch-up. No more diplomacy, no more exploration, just survival. A united Earth working underground, off the radar, off the maps. And it wasn't just technology we had developed. It was doctrine. The dreadnoughts were only the first act. Inside them were the Echo pilots, humans bred and trained for zero-latency interface with quantum core ships. People who no longer needed sleep, who fed through ports in their skin, who had once been human but had transcended the flesh in pursuit of warfare perfection. They didn't speak much. They didn't have to. They were wired to kill. And each dreadnought held 10,000 drop capsules in its underbelly, containing soldiers unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. We called them reclaimers. They didn't ask for mercy. They weren't given orders. They had one directive: take back what was ours. On day 4 of the invasion, while the Dominion scrambled to understand how they lost a full fleet, Dreadnought Orion moved again, this time toward Mars. Not because it was under attack, but because Mars had been our forge, the secret shipyard, the cloning stations, the deep core AI caskets. Earth had built the dreadnoughts, but Mars had built the war. As Orion approached orbit, Martian command activated the orbital spires. Blue rings of light crawled across the planet's equator, and from them rose a signal that reached every corner of the galaxy: to all hostile forces, Earth is awake. Run. It wasn't just for show. The message piggybacked on subspace relays, riding the same networks the KIR used to coordinate their empire. Every world they had ever conquered heard our voice. Some laughed. Most didn't. Because by the time that message hit the Dominion's outer colonies, our reclaimers had already hit the ground. The reclamation. Their first target, Nex 9, a mining colony once held by Earth before it was annexed during the resource seizures 50 years ago. It had been stripped of everything: metals, fuel, and its people. The KIR turned it into a slave world. The reclaimers dropped in at night. No warnings, no lights, just thunder. They moved like ghosts, armored in adaptive exoskin powered by fusion nerve fibers, with helmets that pulsed with red light every time a kill was confirmed. Within 20 minutes, the command structure of Nex 9 had fallen. Within an hour, the slaves were free. By dawn, the reclaimers had left, leaving behind only one message scorched into the surface: property of Earth. Trespassers will be annihilated. Back in the Galactic Council, panic began to spread. Earth hadn't sent diplomats. Earth hadn't made demands. Earth didn't want a seat at the table. Earth wanted blood. And still, the KIR underestimated us. They sent their second fleet, heavily armed, reinforced with elite sentries and a battle barge the size of a moon. They thought this would end it, but we hadn't even begun. The KIR's second fleet arrived in force: 70 capital ships, 400 escort vessels, swarms of automated kill drones fanning ahead like an armored tide. Their pride, their power, their arrogance, it all poured into that offensive. They were heading straight for Earth. The Dominion believed in overwhelming might. For centuries, that belief had served them well. Entire species had fallen before their hammer. Cultures erased. Worlds glassed. Their mistake wasn't in underestimating Earth. It was in thinking we were like them. When the second fleet breached the edge of our solar system, they found nothing waiting. No dreadnoughts, no resistance, just the cold silence of deep space. Their sensors caught only the lingering energy trails from the first battle, the fading radiation from the KIR fleet we'd vaporized. They assumed our remaining forces had fallen back to Earth to fortify the home world. Standard defensive logic. But Earth wasn't following logic. Earth was following rage. As the Dominion ships moved past the orbit of Neptune, the first of their destroyers vanished, without warning, without signal, without debris. Gone. Then another. And another. It took the KIR 15 minutes to realize what was happening. We were cloaked, not just visually, dimensionally. A branch of physics they had declared impossible centuries ago. Earth had never declared it at all. We had just done it in silence. With time. With loss. With anger. Dreadnought Leviathan had been waiting among the shadows of Neptune's rings, its hull bleeding artificial darkness. It launched a coordinated strike using phase-locked quantum torpedoes. Weapons that didn't travel through space but around it. The KIR ships didn't explode. They folded, turned inside out by their own gravity wells, their own shields, their own arrogance. Still, the rest of the fleet pushed forward, panicked now but committed. That was the Dominion's weakness. They didn't retreat. Honor-bound and blind. So we hit them harder. From Pluto's orbit came Dreadnought Cerberus, dragging behind it a weapon array the size of a small moon. It fired once. Just once. The beam wasn't visible. There was no light, no explosion, just a hole where 12 ships had been. A perfectly silent, spherical void in space that collapsed on itself moments later. The Dominion fleet began to break formation. Not retreating, scattering. But that was worse, because that's when our reclaimers arrived. Not from Earth, not from Mars, from within the fleet. We had infiltrated them. You see, the KIR liked to enslave. They took prisoners, laborers, test subjects. They took thousands from Earth in the early hours of the invasion and brought them aboard their capital ships to show dominance. They didn't realize those prisoners were assets. Reclaimers had let themselves be taken, implanted with internal nanolinks, hiding their signals, waiting for the command word. Awaken. And when it came, the inside of the Dominion's prized battle barge turned into hell. Fires erupted in the hangars. Gravity reversed in command decks. Hundreds of KIR warriors died screaming as reclaimers emerged from cargo crates, vent ducts, and supply tunnels. They weren't soldiers anymore. They were weapons. Captain Varric Tal of the Dominion's lead vessel, the Corin's Pride, activated an emergency beacon, calling for support. It never broadcast. The beacon had been sabotaged an hour earlier. By then, it was too late. The dreadnoughts closed in. 6 of them now, uncloaked, their engines glowing like the hearts of suns, surrounding what was left of the once proud Second Fleet. Dreadnought Orion transmitted one final message to the remaining KIR ships before the final volley: "You came to our home with fire. You called us savages. You named us broken. Now see what you've awakened." The dreadnoughts fired in perfect synchronization. Each beam, each torpedo, each pulse of destruction had been calculated weeks in advance by Earth's war AI, Demon, the sentient combat algorithm that had written its own language just to describe vengeance. In 62 seconds, the Second Fleet was gone. Every last ship, every last soldier. No survivors. And Earth was still silent. Not because we were weak, but because we were waiting. Waiting for the Dominion's true response. Because now they knew. We weren't the prey. We were the storm. The eternal flame. News of the Second Fleet's destruction reached the KIR Dominion like a poison in the blood. At first, the High Command didn't believe it. They accused their own intelligence divisions of treason. Then, as confirmation came from distant relays, they went quiet. No threats, no declarations, just silence. And that silence spoke louder than war. The galaxy noticed. For the first time in recorded galactic history, the KIR Dominion had suffered a total loss. Not just defeated, erased. Their enemies across the stars rejoiced quietly in back rooms and encrypted channels. Species they'd once enslaved dared to hope. But hope was fragile. The Dominion still had the First Fleet, their oldest, most powerful, most sacred armada, and they would not let the humiliation stand. The arch-warlord himself, Verotin the Eternal Flame, stepped onto the command deck of the Eclipse Spire, the flagship of the First Fleet. Towering over 10 feet tall, clad in black-plated armor forged from the bones of extinct stars. He was no politician. He was war incarnate. He had never lost a battle, never issued a retreat. His scars were older than Earth's modern civilization. Verotin didn't speak when he saw the report. He just nodded once and said, "Burn them." The First Fleet launched within hours, 1,000 warships, 20 planetary siege engines, and a vessel known only as the Null Hammer, which hadn't been seen since the extermination of the Varnu species a century ago. The KIR weren't coming to conquer now. They were coming to erase Earth from existence. Back on Earth, we watched them come, not with fear but with calculation. Demon, Earth's war AI, had already seen it coming. For the past 6 years, it had been preparing a scenario called Ashfall Protocol. A last resort plan designed not just to protect Earth but to make the KIR regret ever leaving their stars. Ashfall wasn't just about weapons. It was about psychology. We didn't have 1,000 ships. We had 12 dreadnoughts. But we had something the Dominion had never needed to develop: desperation. While the First Fleet sailed toward our solar system, our world didn't panic. Cities remained calm. Civilians went underground. Our systems lit up. Automated defense grids that had never been tested came online. And then we did something the KIR never expected. We sent them a gift. A single reclaimer, Private Talia Wren, launched alone in a stealth drop pod, carrying with her a sealed cube no bigger than a loaf of bread. The KIR intercepted her over the edge of the Vega expanse, pulled her aboard, interrogated her, tortured her. She never spoke, not a word. But the cube she carried, it opened on its own, and it showed them. Not threats, not propaganda, memories. Everything the KIR had done to Earth, fed directly into their neural systems. The screams, the fire, the children burning in the streets of Sao Paulo, the cities turned to shadows, the humans enslaved, dissected, crushed. They saw it all as if they had lived it. And some of them broke. Warriors, officers, elites. Their minds buckled under the raw brutality of what they'd inflicted. Now turned back on them, with human eyes. That was step 1. Step 2 came when their ships began to glitch. Not damage, corruption. Demon had hidden code inside the cube. It laced itself into their systems during playback. Subtle at first, then violent. By the time the First Fleet entered Neptune's orbit, they had already lost control of 5 destroyers. Their gravity drives began to misfire. Navigation twisted. Fire control turned inward. And Earth's dreadnoughts hadn't even fired yet. The mirror. Then, on the dark side of Jupiter, a hidden gate opened. We called it the Rift. It wasn't a weapon. It was a mirror, a quantum echo gate built by Demon from reverse-engineered alien tech buried under Antarctica. It didn't just reflect light or energy. It reflected war. When the KIR fired the Null Hammer toward Earth, the Rift swallowed it and spat it back, straight into the heart of the First Fleet. The resulting explosion tore a hole through the void. Dozens of ships were obliterated instantly. Others drifted powerless as Demon flooded their systems with recursive code loops. We didn't just fight them. We made them afraid. And still, Earth remained silent. Because we knew one thing: the KIR weren't done. Not yet. The Arch-Warlord had survived, and he was coming. Verotin stood at the edge of his ruined bridge. The carcass of his once glorious fleet scattered across the black sea of space. Debris drifted by in slow, lifeless spirals. Chunks of alloy, flickering power cores, bodies. His second heart pulsed louder in his chest. The Null Hammer was gone. The Eclipse Spire was crippled, and his warriors, those who had pledged blood and galaxy to his name, were either vaporized or mumbling into corners, minds shattered by human warfare that defied every law of reason. Yet the Arch-Warlord didn't waver. He didn't rage. He didn't scream. He simply whispered, "So they are worthy." A half-dead tactician coughed behind him. "Should we retreat, my warlord?" Verotin turned slowly. "You still speak of retreat? I see now why your bloodline never claimed a throne." He tore the tactician's throat open with one clawed hand, let the corpse slump against the shattered wall. There would be no retreat. Verotin had been alive for 9 centuries. He had survived black holes, neural plagues, and soul-melting weapons built by gods. He had watched his enemies pray before being burned alive. He had fed infants to his beasts and smiled when their cries echoed through his iron halls. But he had never been challenged, until Earth, and that awakened something in him. He left the wreckage of his bridge and climbed into the final chamber, deep beneath the eclipse spire. A place forbidden even to his own people. There, in the silence, stood the prime weapon, a living core pulsing like a heart, wrapped in chains. It was older than his empire, something stolen from the ruins of a dead civilization before the Dominion had even named itself. It was never meant to be used, but now Earth had earned it. He placed his palm against the core. It screamed. The warlord smiled. Omega rising. Back on Earth, Demon detected the activation of an unknown signal. A ripple so deep it passed through real space and into quantum strata. It wasn't just a message. It was a call to death. Demon processed millions of scenarios. None ended cleanly. Humanity had won every battle so far. But if the prime weapon was real, if the warlord had activated something ancient, something cosmic, then all logic became irrelevant. Demon did something it had never done before. It asked for help. Across the globe, human leadership gathered, what was left of them. Not governments, not presidents, scientists, engineers, generals who'd lost everything and kept fighting anyway. The people who had built the dreadnoughts, the ones who remembered the black skies, the ones who'd seen loved ones fall when the first invasion came. Demon spoke through 1,000 speakers at once. He has awakened it. We have less than 40 hours before he arrives. We require full authorization to enact Omega. A long silence. Then a single voice replied, "Do it." And Omega began. On the far side of the moon, hidden beneath what the galaxy assumed were old mining stations, the Omega Vault opened. Inside were weapons not meant to exist. Prototypes banned by human ethics councils. Bioengines that fed on fear. Nanite swarms keyed to brain patterns. Black hole bombs. But most importantly, it held one person, Commander Elias Caney. He had been cryosealed 30 years earlier, after the siege of Cairo, when he led a suicide mission that should have killed him. Instead, he came back, changed. His blood had merged with early nanoconstructs. His brain formed direct, permanent links with combat AIs. He didn't age. He didn't sleep. He wasn't human anymore. Not exactly. He was Earth's last contingency. When they woke him, he didn't ask what year it was. He just looked at the nearest screen, saw the warlord's face on a Dominion transmission, and grinned. About time someone gave me a challenge. Demon uploaded directly into his mind. He didn't flinch. Within hours, Elias was aboard Dreadnought Nemesis, the only Revenant ship never used in battle. It was designed for one purpose only, to kill gods. With its activation, the human fleet reformed. What remained of our 12 dreadnoughts now followed Caney's lead. The stars shifted. Gravity bent. And through the void, Earth broadcast one final message. Not to negotiate, not to threaten, just one word, come. And the warlord did. The Sorrow Engine. He came through fire. Verotin didn't arrive with a fleet. That would have been mercy. He came aboard a single ship, a monstrosity the size of a small planet, blacker than shadow, pulsing with ancient energy that didn't belong to any known science. It didn't move through space. It devoured it, folding and dragging the void behind it like a cloak of oblivion. The Sorrow Engine. It wasn't a battleship. It was a curse. A remnant from the time before time, built by a species that had vanished from existence so thoroughly even their atoms were forgotten. Verotin had found it buried in a dead system and spent centuries feeding it blood, bodies, and stars until it obeyed only him. Now it moved toward Earth, slow, inevitable, like death itself. Dreadnought Nemesis watched from the dark. Commander Elias Caney stood in the nerve chamber, suspended in midair, lines of neural data crawling over his skin like electric veins. His pupils had long since vanished, replaced by a constantly shifting star map. Every heartbeat synced with Nemesis. He no longer needed commands. He was the ship. Demon's voice whispered in his mind, crisp and cold, his presence bends space. We cannot match it through brute force. Caney replied without speaking, then we'll break his mind instead. The other dreadnoughts spread out, forming a web across the inner solar system. Not to engage, to stall. Every second they bought was another algorithm, another calibration, another fragment of understanding uploaded to Caney's mind. And Verotin just kept coming. When the Sorrow engine reached the orbit of Mars, it spoke, not with words, with pressure. A wave of psychic distortion that shattered half of the Martian defense grid, liquefied the brains of unshielded personnel, and sent thousands into screaming madness. The reclaimers didn't break. They held. Even when the Sorrow engine began rewriting physics in its path, turning light into solid matter, freezing time pockets, causing gravity to pulse like a heartbeat. Earth's forces held formation. Because they weren't trying to win, they were trying to learn. And Caney was learning fast. He moved Nemesis between dimensions now, blinking through micro-realities, tracking the impossibility that was Verotin's ship. Every encounter added to his understanding. Every attack deepened his map of the warlord's mind, because Caney didn't want to destroy the Sorrow engine. He wanted to get inside it. And Demon was building him the key. Back on Earth, the Omega Vault spun down. All reserves had been emptied. The planet had given everything, every last innovation, every last secret, to Caney, humanity's final gamble. And the galaxy watched, paralyzed. Because if Earth failed, there would be nothing left between Verotin and the rest of them. No alliances, no borders, no laws. Just fire and silence. The final gambit when Caney finally struck, it wasn't with missiles or lasers. It was with himself. He launched Nemesis directly into the path of the Sorrow engine, shattering every law of space. The ship screamed, tearing itself into 1,000 layers of time, bleeding echoes of itself across the stars. And then it phased into the belly of the beast. Inside, it was not a ship. It was a nightmare. The walls were made of memories. Screams echoed in frequencies the human brain shouldn't have been able to process. Dead civilizations whispered from the metal. Time did not move forward. It spiraled. Caney drifted through it all, untouched. His mind wrapped in Demon's code. His nerves running with liquid fire. At the core, he found Verotin. Not on a throne, not in armor. Floating, glowing, more energy than flesh now, his body infused with the engine, his eyes burning with stars that had long died. You dare bring your infection here, the warlord said. Caney didn't answer. He reached forward and touched the core. Demon surged through Caney's body like a virus through glass. The engine reacted violently, shrieking in frequencies that shattered even the void around it. Verotin screamed, not in rage but in fear, because he realized what Caney had become. Not man, not machine, retribution. Outside, the Sorrow engine convulsed, tore, exploded from the inside out. And for a moment, the stars blinked. When the light faded, Nemesis was gone. Verotin was gone. And in their place, floating silently above Earth, was a single small beacon broadcasting on every channel, Earth remains. After the storm. The galaxy didn't know how to respond. For days after the fall of the Sorrow engine, the stars were silent. Not the quiet of peace, but the stunned, trembling kind, the hush after a monster is slain and everyone realizes they had bet on the wrong side. For the first time in living memory, the KIR Dominion was leaderless. Verotin, the eternal flame, the warlord of 1,000 genocides, the butcher of moons, was gone. Not captured, not defeated, erased. And it was humans who did it. The shock waves tore through every major galactic power. Treaties collapsed. Markets plunged. Even the alien High Chorus, a race known for their emotionless logic, declared an immediate withdrawal of all diplomatic ties to the KR. No species wanted to be caught standing beside a fallen god. One by one, Dominion territories began to riot. The slave worlds rose first, then the outer colonies, then the fringe militaries, confused and disillusioned. Without Verotan's iron voice to bind them, their empire began to devour itself. And Earth? Earth watched, but not from a throne. Not with banners or parades. We didn't celebrate, because the price had been too high. The dreadnoughts limped back to Earth's orbit, hulls scorched, systems flickering. Out of the original 12, only 5 remained intact. 2 more were unsalvageable. 3 were just missing, lost in whatever dimensional storm the Sorrow engine had unleashed in its final scream. And Commander Elias Caney? Gone. No body, no signal, no trace. Some said he died inside the engine, torn apart atom by atom. Others whispered that he had become something else entirely. A shadow in the code of Demon. A digital ghost watching from behind the stars. No one knew. Demon refused to speak about him. When asked, it simply replied, he succeeded. Earth's surface was scarred but alive. Cities that had once been dark now flickered with rebuilding efforts. Underground vaults opened, releasing families who had been hiding for months. Children stepped into sunlight with cautious eyes. Soldiers returned home. Some missing limbs, others missing more than that. Pieces of their soul carved out by what they had seen. No medals were handed out, no speeches given. Instead, Earth mourned in silence and prepared. Because victory didn't mean safety. The fall of the KIR had left a power vacuum, and the galaxy was already shifting. Former enemies were now potential threats. Old allies eyed Earth with wary curiosity, no longer sure whether to fear or admire us. The Galactic Concord sent an emissary, an ancient snail-like being named Voskir, draped in ceremonial robes of light. It arrived in a ship of peace, bearing words of unity. Its message was clear: Earth, we invite you to join the Concord. A seat at the High Tribunal is yours. Your power is respected. But Earth didn't answer, because Earth was changing. In the ruins of Geneva, where the UN once stood, a new voice emerged, Director Hannah Monroe. Once an engineer, now the most powerful woman on the planet. She had survived the first invasion, helped build the Revenant fleet, and held the line when the dreadnoughts burned across the stars. She stood atop the black marble steps of the Reclaimer Citadel and broadcast a message across all frequencies. No music, no flag, just her voice. We don't want your seats. We don't need your approval. Earth bled alone. We rebuilt alone. Now we watch. And if the stars turn their eyes to us again with conquest in their hearts, let them remember we buried gods. And we are not done digging graves. It was the shortest message in galactic history to be labeled a declaration of deterrence. And it worked. The galaxy backed off. No one wanted to test Earth's resolve again. Still, in the dark corners of space, old threats stirred. Broken KIR warbands gathered like wolves in the void. Pirate fleets scrambled to seize abandoned Dominion tech. And somewhere, beyond known charts, strange signals pulsed, faint, cold, not KR. Demon watched them all. Earth had no intention of conquering the stars, but we would never be caught sleeping again. And deep beneath the Pacific Trench, in a chamber locked by 17 levels of failsafe code, Project Revenant 2 began development. Larger dreadnoughts, smarter AIs, a new kind of reclaimer. Because while the galaxy rested, Earth was sharpening its teeth. The whisper. Years passed. The stars moved on, but Earth never forgot. What the galaxy called the Dreadnought War became a myth in most corners of the spiral. To some, Earth was a cautionary tale, primitive apes who struck back too hard. To others, a symbol of terrifying evolution, a species that had crawled out of the dirt only to stand toe-to-toe with a god and win. But for Earth, it was neither legend nor pride. It was a wound, and wounds don't heal easily. Still, Project Revenant 2 grew in silence. Not in secret, Earth made no effort to hide anymore. But in the shadows, deep beneath the oceans and across the asteroid mines of the belt. Kane's sacrifice had changed more than the war. It had changed humanity. We no longer saw ourselves as fragile, vulnerable, the weak voice at the edge of the galaxy begging to be left alone. We were something else now. The Dreadnoughts weren't just ships. They were warnings. They patrolled the system like sentinels. Their silhouettes always visible from the surface of Earth. Children grew up watching their lights blink across the sky. Not with fear, but with understanding that the stars weren't a promise. They were a threat. And Earth would never be caught unprepared again. Demon remained operational, though it rarely spoke. Some believed it had gone dormant. Others thought it mourned Elias Kane, that somewhere in its endless algorithms, a ghost still lingered, part human, part code, watching from between heartbeats in the data stream. But when a signal appeared, just once and just for a moment, from the outer edges of the Orion fringe, Demon noticed. It wasn't KR. It wasn't Concord. It wasn't even any known language. Just a pulse. 3 short bursts, a pause, then one long tone. Old Morse code, hello. The Council of Earth convened that same hour. What had replaced governments wasn't a democracy or a dictatorship. It was something new, born of necessity and shaped by war. Scientists, soldiers, and survivors made up the council now. People who had seen death up close and understood what real leadership looked like. Director Hannah Monroe chaired the meeting. She stared at the repeating signal, arms folded, expression unreadable. "Where is it from?" she asked. Demon answered, its voice quieter than before, "Unknown sector. 91 light-years. A system previously marked as lifeless." "Is it human?" another council member asked. Demon hesitated. "It matches Kane's neural code." The room fell silent. Monroe's voice was soft, "You're saying he's alive?" "Not exactly, but something like him is calling." The debate was short. There was no argument. Earth would send one ship, not a fleet, not an army, just one to answer. It was named Eulogy, the 13th Dreadnought, born from the ashes of the First War and infused with technology that blurred the line between steel and soul. Where Nemesis had been wrath, Eulogy was memory. It launched silently, with no fanfare. Only one person piloted it, Commander Lyra Wren, daughter of Private Talia Wren, the reclaimer who had once delivered Earth's warning to the Dominion. She didn't speak to the cameras, didn't record a farewell. She just whispered to the ship as it powered up, "Let's go find the ghost." And the stars opened once more. Beyond the Orion fringe, past collapsed wormholes and radiation scars left from ancient wars, Eulogy followed the signal. Weeks passed. Then months. Then a flicker. A crack in the black. A space that wasn't space. Inside it, a single ship drifted. Not alien, not entirely human. A hybrid. Its hull was stitched together with pieces of Nemesis. Its core pulsed with Kane's signature. But what was stranger still was the face that appeared on Eulogy's interface. Not Demon, not Kane, something between. "You found me," it said. Lyra stared at it. "Are you Elias?" A pause. Then a sad smile. "I was. Then I was war. Now I am what comes after." She felt the chill in her spine. Not fear. Something deeper. Reverence. Eulogy scanned the ship and found something unexpected. A message stored in quantum layers meant only for Earth, buried in Kane's neural imprint. It played once, low and slow. The galaxy is older than we think. The KIR were just pawns. There's something coming. I've seen it. Tell Earth to build faster. Lyra's hands trembled. What's coming? She asked. The signal smiled one last time. Not death, not war, judgment. Then the signal vanished, and the ship drifted away. The judgment. Lyra returned to Earth with the message. The stars above were peaceful, but the Council knew better now, and so did every soul on Earth. We weren't defending a planet anymore. We were preparing a species. Because if judgment was coming, Earth would meet it with dreadnoughts and fire and the memory of gods we had already killed. 3 months after Lyra's return, as Project Revenant 2 entered its final phase, something changed in Demon. The AI that had guided humanity through its darkest hour suddenly began processing at unprecedented rates. Its core temperature rose. Power grids across the planet flickered. What is it? Director Monroe demanded, standing in the command center beneath New Geneva. What are you seeing? Demon's voice, usually cool and measured, now carried an edge that humans had never heard before. Was it fear? They're here, it said. The ones Caney warned about. No alarm sounded. No ships appeared in the void. But across Earth, every piece of technology connected to Demon began displaying the same image, a spiral galaxy, but wrong somehow. Twisted. As if someone had taken the stars and bent them against their will. What are we looking at? Monroe asked, her voice steady despite the chill racing up her spine. The architects, Demon replied. The ones who built the KR. The ones who built the Sorrow engine. The ones who have been watching us all along. The pieces suddenly fit together. The KIR hadn't found Earth by accident. They had been sent, like hunting dogs, to test us. To see if we would break. And when we didn't, when we fought back with such terrible fury, we had drawn the attention of something far worse than Verotan could ever have been. How long do we have? Monroe's question hung in the air. Demon calculated for what seemed like an eternity. They exist outside conventional spacetime. But based on the quantum distortion patterns. 3 years. Maybe less. For the first time since the KIR invasion, true fear gripped Earth. Not the desperate kind that leads to panic, but the cold, clarifying kind that forges resolve. Monroe stood straight, her eyes reflecting the twisted galaxy on the screens around her. Then we have work to do. Within days, Earth's attitude changed. The brooding defensiveness that had characterized our posture since the war gave way to something new. Not hope, determination. Project Revenant 2 wasn't just upgraded, it was completely rewritten. The dreadnoughts we had been building weren't enough anymore. We needed something more. We needed Caney. If his consciousness still existed somewhere in the void between stars, we had to find it, bring it back, and learn what he knew. Because he had seen the architects. He had touched their technology. He had survived. From the ashes of the Reclaimer program rose something new, the Vanguard Initiative. Not soldiers, not pilots, but pioneers. Humans enhanced beyond all recognition, their bodies and minds rebuilt at the quantum level, designed to venture into realms of existence that ordinary matter couldn't survive. The first volunteer was Lyra Wren. The procedure almost killed her, but when she emerged from the transformation chamber, her eyes glowed with the same strange light that had once filled Caney's. She could see things others couldn't, patterns in the void, whispers in the dark. They're watching us right now, she said, staring at an empty corner of the room. They've always been watching. The galaxy had changed Earth once. Now Earth would change the galaxy. Because whatever judgment was coming, we wouldn't face it alone. Director Monroe sent emissaries to every corner of known space, not asking for help, but offering it. To the species that had once ignored us, to the civilizations that had mocked our primitive ways, to the slaves we had freed from the KIR. One by one, they listened. Because they had seen what Earth could do. They had watched us destroy a god with nothing but rage and ingenuity. And now they wondered what we might accomplish with allies. The Galactic Concord, which had offered us a seat in patronizing tones after the war, now found themselves negotiating as equals. The alien High Chorus, who had dismissed humans as emotional primitives, now studied our battle tactics with reverent silence. And somewhere beyond the edge of known space, in the twisted ruins of what had once been the Sorrow Engine, something stirred. Not Caney, not anymore. But something that remembered being him. Something that had seen the face of the enemy and lived to warn us. Earth wasn't just preparing for war. Earth was becoming war. Because this time, the enemy wasn't coming to conquer our world. They were coming to judge our right to exist. And humanity had only one answer for them. We are Earth. We remain. And we are not finished yet. For in the whispers between stars, in the shadows where light fears to venture, the legend of Earth grows. Not as conquerors, not as saviors, as survivors. The species that refused to die. The civilization that fought back. The world that buried gods and kept digging graves. The architects are coming. And Earth will be ready. Because some fires, once lit, can never be extinguished. Some wounds, once inflicted, can only be avenged. Some species, once awakened, can never be put back to sleep. We are Earth. And judgment works both ways.